Mozart's piano sonatas are in some way great feats of improvisation, sort of crystallised into a form. What are the great challenges of playing them?
There are many challenges of playing Mozart sonatas, but I think the key element is respecting the very tight structure and mould that Mozart creates in these pieces, but being able to play them with joy and freshness and abandon, but with that respect of these wonderfully creative works, to have that respect for Mozart, but also to play with almost a feeling of improvisation as well. It's difficult, it's a very fine balance to make.
You've said in the past that you shouldn't take the Dresden China approach too far. Well, can you explain what you meant by that?
Yes, I think there's a tendency to overcook Mozart's music, to overshape it. As musicians, we're so obsessed with details. It's important to take note of all the detail in Mozart's music. But sometimes we tend to go over the top and overdo things. There's a time and place where you have to really hold back, and in order to play with a freedom, if you overdo it, over-express things, it can sound a little bit, it can cheapen the quality of the music.
Amateur pianists often see a piece of Mozart and think, oh, I think I can play that, it's in C major, you know, I'll give that a go. Whereas professional pianists are terrified of it. Why is it so terrifying?
Mozart's music is exceptionally exposed. You can't get away with anything with his music. The audience can hear every single note. The great difficulty is to try and evoke a cantabile line. We're playing on a percussive instrument, this modern instrument nowadays. It's still percussive. We can create a beautiful tone, but it's very, very difficult for a pianist to create this long, seamless line. And especially with Mozart's slow movements, they must sing like arias. He was so influenced by the voice, and as we know from his operas, he excelled in operatic writing. And I think in his instrumental writing, and even more so for the piano music, he's really trying to evoke the human voice, as well as in many of the sonatas, other orchestral instruments. I often try and think of that as I'm working through these pieces. I try and think of clarinet, for example, which Mozart wrote beautifully for, or the tenor line of a viola, in all his, not only the slow movements, but in the outer movements of each sonata as well. I do think orchestrally, on an intimate level, and also in quite a grand scale too.
It's quite a remarkable feat that you'll be playing all the sonatas in just 4 concerts. Can you say something about the journey that you'll be making from his very first early sonatas, when he was very, very young, obviously writing those, to the last ones?
I wanted to play the complete sonatas more or less chronologically, so that the audience can see the development. I mean, the opening sonata is still, it's perfect, it's exquisite, it's beautifully written. I wouldn't want to change a note of it. But you'll see as you go through the sonatas how Mozart develops his pianistic technique, his compositional techniques. He uses more chromaticism towards the end of in the later sonatas. And with the development of the piano, the Viennese forte pianos, you also notice him taking advantage of the registers of the keyboard. There's some quite breathtaking use of the scope of the keyboard, particularly in one sonata in the slow movement of K533, where he's almost breaking the boundaries, breaking the barriers of the piano. Not necessarily on a dynamic level, but purely for taking advantage of the full register of the keyboard.
Talking of which, he was composing most of these sonatas for forte piano, rather than pianoforte. What do you feel about playing them on a Steinway, which he would obviously never have heard a piano quite like that?
Yes. I think Mozart would have been amazed by the piano that we have today. the modern instruments, and I'll be performing on a Steinway concertgram for this series. And because, as I talked about earlier, the cantabile tone it's so important for Mozart. It was always uppermost in his mind, I think, when he was composing these works. He would have been delighted with the sound that we can now create. The challenge is, the aim is to create this thread. He talks about il filo, the thread that must run through a movement, and to try and incorporate that throughout this series is going to be my aim, and hopefully it will be successful.